Welcome everyone to this week's Twirl Talk. I'm Kyle Kaiser, and we are doing a reboot of the men's talk. And that's kind of a play because we have a lot of topics to talk about, but one of the hot topics right now is the involvement of men in the strut category. So we'll go into what that is. And I have so many wonderful people on this call that everyone could be a panelist, but we kind of trimmed it down a little bit so we could hone in our discussion in the first half hour, and then we'll open it up from there. So starting first is one of our first U.S. team members and a longtime board member, coach, and judge, John Chamberlain. And John's been through all of the changes and morphs of twirling and is just a really respected voice, a voice I really respect from a decision-making standpoint, coaching, former performer, and then his overall global view of what to do with the sport of twirling. So John, I know you're super busy. Thank you for joining us tonight.
My pleasure. It's great to see so much males here tonight. And it's good just to see folks like Kevin from way back when. I mean, even though I'm much older, and when I was retiring, you were just a baby. But so yeah, I'm kind of the granddaddy on this call, but that's okay.
No, history matters. And I think that's what's really good about this discussion, in that history is going to drive the future, and some of the things that we've made mistakes with that we could do better, and some of the things that we've done really well that we want to continue and perpetuate. Right. Next up is Michael Lopez. And Michael is kind of a burgeoning leader voice in the sport in multiple organizations. And I've been able to spend more time with Michael almost on Zoom calls through this last year than any other time. But I've had him on the team, a U.S. team international cup athlete and U.S. team athlete. And Michael, welcome. Thank you for joining us tonight. I think that
Thank you so much for the invite. Really appreciate it.
Well, it's been fun to have you working in the technology department of the things that we're doing, and kind of the young voices that we need to help drive what's changing. Next up is a mover and a shaker that always has great ideas, and I love talking to, is Michael Harris. And Michael is fusion twirling and a coach and judge. And Michael can have some really inspiring ideas and thoughts about things. And I was real excited to get him on the call tonight. So thank you, Michael.
Thanks, Kyle. It's quite an introduction. I was wondering, was that going to be me? Thank you.
It's been fun to Michael and I kind of are able to bounce some things around. We work together in the region, and I was around when he first started twirling, and it's been fun to watch him grow into a professional in the sport. Next up, new board member and coach and judge and world champion, Jonathan Birkin. So Jonathan, thank you for joining us tonight.
Yes, thanks for having me.
And we get several other discussions during this time because of our region. Jonathan's a new member in Ohio, and so it's been fun to kind of toss around some of the things that we need to work on. And kind of the academic amongst us tonight, who's worked in the specialty of gender studies and is soon going to be Dr. Trenton Haltom, working on his PhD in sociology. Trenton Haltom, so thank you for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me again.
Well, and you, as I said, you're kind of the academic in this center. And so you come at it from a whole different set of information and circumstances that are really valuable. And like I said, there are other world champion and Canadian and US team members and Ohio State drum majors. And this is kind of a rock star panel of people. So thank you, everyone. I will get to you. Let's start first, John Chamberlain, because we talked on a Twirl Talk before. We kind of dove into men in twirling. But we want to take it a little bit further tonight. So when we're talking about gender roles in twirling and the events and things like that, talk to me a little bit about the history, about the separation of the men and women. And was that valuable to you? Did it let you shine? And at what point did the competition with the women, what did that do for you?
That's a loaded question. Back in 1909, when I first started, obviously, yes. I can remember my very first contest, actually. I thought I was going to compete against the girls. I was a beginner, could barely do a two-spin at best. And I had practiced my little 1-minute routine for beginner solo. And like the night before the competition, my coach came to me and said, "Oh no, you're only going to compete against the boys. You can't compete against the girls." And so you have to have a 2-minute routine. Well, hello, the contest is tomorrow. So obviously I did my routine twice, actually 2.5 times, because I'd practiced so well and it was so fast. And probably only the few no drops I've ever done in my life. But anyway, so yeah, it's, it was a shock to me, I guess, at first, even at 8 years old, that I could, because the only reason I got into twirling was because of my sister. My sister and I are 13 months apart in birth. We're like twins. We did everything together. So it was just obvious that she went to the Y for baton lessons. I went to the Y for baton lessons. I'm not going without her. So, so I've always just thought it was going to be a boy-girl sport. We all just did it together. But it was quite shocking, I guess, for the first 4 years at least. It was kind of hard because, when you're not big in numbers, obviously, yes, everybody notices you on the floor because you're the male at the competition, and you definitely get that impact. And part of that I loved. Let's face it. I mean, who doesn't love glory and time on the floor?
Well, you are a performer. And I think the other thing that makes you stand out, John, why you're valuable to this discussion is that in my history, being one growing up watching you twirl, you were one of the first notable bodywork type guys. That you were leaping across the floor when other guys were standing still and spinning. So I think your voice is really interesting because you were in dance twirl, what we now know as artistic twirl, and you were head to head with the women. Mm-hmm. And so I want to delve into that a little bit further. Michael, tell me a little bit about your experience or your thoughts. Did you ever think you were competing against the girls, or did you know how it played out?
Well, since living down here in Texas, Trent and I really didn't have any competition down here. We only competed against the girls in multiple baton events. But when Trenton left, I was all alone. So the thing is, it felt so foreign to me to go to nationals or to world to actually compete against men because I didn't have anybody down there pushing me. If that answers the question.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So do you think you needed to be against all the other men? Did you need that competition?
Yes, because it just keeps pushing you. That's why I kind of put some words into other people's ears down here in Texas, saying, "Hey, you think you can make like a like a co-ed solo division so I can actually have competition?" Because I think if I would have had competition and if Trenton didn't leave me down here all by myself,
Trenton, how dare you?
I mean, it could have really been pushing us until we got to that national level.
I understood, but also I'm feeling that I love the value of the men's division as the men's division, but I also don't want them not competitive with what's out there. So Michael, I got to watch you grow up twirling in there with the women, and I saw the women pushing you, that you wanted to be as good as anyone next to you that you were practicing with. Is that true?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. And that's a lot of time. One of the main reasons why I tried to get on a team, just wanting to be in the gym or even practicing in the gym with, the world teams at the time. Being pushed by those people was the only option, because if I were to look at Ohio, okay, the state of Ohio, USTA, Ohio State Championships, I got to take the Boys Cup home 10 times, 12 times, 11 times. I don't remember. I think Kyler won it one more time than me just to prove a point. But a lot of those, I was by myself, there's a picture on there. I got the trophy, but like I signed up for it and I was the only boy there and I got that. Now, getting that extra spotlight definitely helped kind of get me, a little, okay, there's a little more of a push. There's more of a push because, everybody's watching you, as they were saying before. So it was really nice. Now I'm in the picture with all of the, I hate to say the real champions of the girls, because the girls competition that we're at, the solo, the 2 baton, the 3 baton, the strutter, the dance twirl, and me. Okay, all of my best friends, right? So that is one of the things that really pushed me was I'm going to be in. Okay, there's my dog. Excuse me.
That's okay.
Back in the bag.
Real
and
life. It's real life.
They dumped all the food out right here. All the food's out. So I'm gonna do that, and I'm
take care.
here, and I will be listening, and I'll chime right back in.
Take care of that.
that.
Jonathan, you grew up in a situation that you were around a pretty strong all-female team. Were there other men in the program that you started with?
There were not, no. So I started in a local team in Northwest Ohio, in the middle of nowhere. And we actually twirled in WTA first and then DMA. And you twirled with the women in all events. So there wasn't even a separate solo category. So I only competed against women up until my first AYOP, which was when I was 18. And then when I transitioned over to USTA. So yeah, I've been going against the girls for a while, but I think that prepared me well to go into the men's division. And I think really prepared me to go into the senior men's division at WBTF World Championships, and we talked about the senior men's warm up, and it's the most terrifying thing that you'll take part in. But being against that stiff competition with the girls, I think prepared me well for that.
Yes. Well, and it feels like it's its own animal that, at least, what I say when I say I always love the men's warm up at World. I love the men's warm up at World. And I just love how fierce it is. I love how competitive it is. And the girls have their own, but maybe I'm so familiar with that I don't react as strongly to that. So watching the men's warm up is something that I think is thrilling and exciting and just really enthusiastic. So let's dive into the little academic science side of it a little bit, Trenton. Sorry that you get to be, the science guy, but that's who you are. That's who you're studying. So tell me about the science of men and women competing separately, and just give me, I don't even know what to ask. Like, is there a benefit? Tell me your twist on this and the whole subject.
Well, you're lucky I'm teaching a sociology of gender class right now, so I have it in my back pocket. And sorry, Michael, for leaving you. I had to keep getting these degrees, and I'll be done soon. But in terms of the biology or all of these differences that people keep emphasizing, there really aren't as many as you might think. Yes, there's chromosomal differences. Yes, there's different hormonal differences. But when it comes to our abilities, there's a lot more overlap than you might think. I always use the example of height, right? There are going to be extremes on either end of the scale when you consider height. There's going to be very short men, very short women, very tall men, very tall women. And we consider that a very gendered thing, but in reality, the overlap is really considerable. So when we think of an event like Strut, I think if we got the numbers of men, which is another issue entirely, that you'd see some great scores, you'd see some great routines, and that the ability and the technique could be potentially just as good as the girls.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I think absolutely. But so talk to me about this from a judging standpoint, Trenton. I feel like physical differences are more accepted and more easily judged amongst the men than they are in women. That the women, there's a certain stereotype, and we've had this talk because of other twirl talks, whether it be race, whether it be body type, whether it be anything like that, that it appears on the female side of things, there's a definite goal, right, wrong, or otherwise, that there's a perception of what people think is like the ultimate twirler, which we're changing. Things are changing. I think society's changing, education's changing. But do you think that there's more acceptance of difference in men's styles, height, abilities, whether they're physical, whether they're graceful? Do you see that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, consider the numbers. I mean, if you took a percentage of all the jazzy styles versus the ballet styles among women, there'd be a lot more difference. So when there's so few men, the different styles, the different abilities, the different techniques, they stand out a lot more. So in my thinking about my master's research on the topic, almost a lot of the men said that even though they made mistakes, they were given kudos for it, almost just to stay in the sport. It was an encouragement factor, right? A judge wouldn't want to give them too low of scores or too discouraging of comments. Otherwise, it may chase them away from the sport entirely. And of course, there's other factors that boys face in a sport like ours because it's so highly feminine.
Mhm.
But from a judging perspective, I mean, we're told and taught to judge with ability within the style, right? So we have this ideal in mind. And I think without that standard for men, in the same way as a girl, it becomes difficult because we don't always have that image of men in our brains like we do with women. And of course, I'm thinking about, you know, the ballet aesthetic. We can easily go to that for women, which has its problems. You mentioned race, which is a huge factor when it
Mhm.
comes to that. So we just don't have the same go-to in our minds that we're judging against.
Mhm. Right, and that's what it feels like. So sometimes, John, John Chamberlain, I want to talk to you about the Strut event, but first I want to talk as a judge. Do you think sometimes a 4.5 in a man is the same as a 4.5 in a woman?
I would like to answer that question is yes, but and I think it's getting better. I think we are more, our expectations of the male twirler today is that they would have same technical proficiencies, both baton and body. I would say years ago, no. I would, you easily would get a 4 or 5 flash for a male, and the female would probably get a 3 with that same performance. I think that was definitely, I'm happy to say I see it a higher expectation. I think that ever since we began the World Championships back in 1980, I think it started to change. I think the expectations that men can do in baton good body technique. And so the expectations began to change. Prior to that, it didn't matter. In fact, it was kind of cool if you had bent legs on a split leap or, you know, just whatever kind of style you used. I think it was more acceptable. And I think, but I do think now, since we've gotten into the more artistic development in our sport, both for the female and the males, I think part of the reason, Kyle, we all love the men's final warm-up is it's the one time you get to see that many men at that caliber on the floor at one time. We see women all the time at that numbers on the floor, but to see, you know, 12, 15 male twirlers on the floor at that high level at the World Championships, it's very invigorating.
No, that's
Um,
really true. That's
you
a
know,
really true statement because otherwise at a regional, you're going to have 1 or 2 great guys. And so,
exactly.
no, that's a really good statement.
And I think, you know, I came out of a coach that was very much into the dance and development. And I was very fortunate for that in the long run, because I mean, you know, when I first started, I couldn't tell you what instep, out of step. I couldn't even do the first 8 counts of entrance to a solo instep. But
Uh-huh.
through lots of training and development, became such a love of dance and of all types, whether it was jazz, modern, ballet, it didn't matter. And was fully exposed to it in twirling. So
Okay. So when we talk about the hot topic of strut tonight, so for those people listening that aren't familiar, and I don't think there's too many people that listen to these that aren't twirlers, but strut is its own event. And so we have solo, which is basic in baton handling, aerials, contacts, and contact material and rolls. And then strut is a body dominated event. So whether we're talking USTA strut or X strut and MBTA, they're 2 different animals, but they still have bigger demands on them than solo does. Michael Lopez, would you have tried strut?
Absolutely, because the reason why is that it would actually enforce the body technique. Because now for me, I didn't have too great a body technique in the first place. But the thing is, you know, we're coming just like John said, our sport is actually demanding more for you to have a dance background or have some kind of dance training. And the thing is, especially if, I mean, it can actually help with the lower age division of male twirlers to actually grow and build that technique through the years. But and then coming from a judging standpoint, it would actually help them balance out the body and baton simultaneously without having to sacrifice one for the other. So
That's a really good point.
yes, I would have done strut because of what I just said.
Okay. And Michael Harris, you have been coaching strut. What is the challenge in it for you?
Ooh, yeah, that's hard. trying to design those programs to, fit the beat and put all the skills in there when you never did the event was really hard for me. I know you had Delianne Lewis and Sarah Lewis on a couple weeks ago on your Twirl Talk. And to be really honest, she never got the credit. I'm talking about Delianne, Sarah's mom. Delianne never got the credit for teaching me how to do strut, because Sarah was a little taught and she already had a coach, and she came to me and I was doing this stuff. It wasn't in step. She's like, no, Michael, you can't, this isn't going to work. And she's telling me, I'm like, no, it's okay. It's okay. And she goes, no, it's really not. And then that was the beginning of me really figuring it out. And then, so timing, okay. Timing is really the hardest part, to get the picture of what you were trying to create from a choreography standpoint to fit the timing of strut.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's got to be. So, and I think in our revamping of USTA Strut, we're trying to make it more body dominated. So then it's going to be even more challenging for that person that's not done body dominated events to learn along the way. So Jonathan Birkin, you have had your feet in multiple organizations. Have you tackled doing, have you done X-Strut, and have you tackled coaching USTA Strut?
So I have coached X-Strut, and I'm actually experiencing my first USTA Strut. Thanks to Athlete of the Year. USTA Strut is something else. I'm actually very grateful for the left, right music file. But I think what's interesting about this conversation is that, you had asked Michael, do you want to do, or would you have competed in Strut, if you could have? And I think an interesting point to make, I was actually just looking over the short program, the latest round of notes from January from the WBTF meeting, where the men and the women are judged on different criteria for the Grand Jeté. So I think that's an interesting point to make when men and women would strut against each other, because as a strut coach, or coaching the strut event, I know what the judges are looking for as far as a woman is concerned. But if I were to have a male athlete compete in strut, am I to choreograph the same elements, the same grace, the same style and technique, or is there a different judging criteria altogether?
Oh, okay. All right. That's a good point to at least talk about with the judges and with the onset of it, because we've had men do strut. And I think there was just a standard of excellence that you're shooting for. So in USTA Strut, the difference being that you have to hit every beat of the music. The value I find as a collegiate coach is that USTA strutters can travel down a field, hit every beat, do their tricks in step. They learn how to throw the baton and time things in order to be able to do that underneath it. And that's always been my passion and value in strut, has been that for freestyle, then you learn from the day one how to throw that baton far enough to get 2 leaps underneath it and keep timing. So I think that's the value of it. And so Jonathan, would you have strutted?
Had the judging criteria been clearly defined? Yes, because I was comfortable in short program going against Carissa and Jen Marcus and Jenny Hanna at a pre-trials at a nationals that wasn't a world year, because I knew what the judging criteria entailed. If it was just everyone go out there and, try to get your leg behind your head, I don't know that, at least in MBTA, I don't know that I would have fared well.
Right. So that's another whole set of standards. That is it something that's achievable for men, or do you have to be a Troy Crayley or a Mark Nash in order to be successful in it with your level of flexibility? And you guys would know from coaching X-Strut, are the kids that are most successful in X-Strut the ones that are the most flexible? I don't know that answer. Does anyone have an opinion on that?
Yeah, I would love to chime in here.
Go ahead.
Okay, Marshall, I'll get to you, but Matt Freeman, go ahead.
Sure. I think this brings up a great point in terms of choreography and coaching. When you're looking at an athlete that you're developing the program for, there's a lot of coaches that have a strong ability in making that program best suit their abilities and their style, and to let that execute on the floor. So when it's being judged or evaluated, critiqued, you're being able to judge, and I think Trenton had mentioned this as well, the ability within the style. And I think that that is one thing that this conversation culminates to. We've talked about several different events in which men are competing against only men, and some events when men are competing against women. So if this were to be something to be offered, is it something that we would be looking at now? Similar to Jonathan's point, we're changing the criteria and making it a separate event where men would be against men, or are we then mixed in as male athletes competing against the women in the same event?
So tell me your opinion on value. What do you find more valuable for that then?
So I think that growing up as a male twirler and really being interested in the competitive side of things and always staying competitive, it added an extra set of complexity to be able to maintain that competitiveness across the country and across organizations. And it gave challenges to men to be able to keep up with the women in some regard. And then also some men in divisions in which we competed. So I think that there's value in both. And there definitely can be more clarity across all organizations and all events into which we'd like to move to. So there needs to be a clear direction in what our mindset is looking like moving forward, and how we can collaborate together to make that beneficial for all.
No, that sounds great. And part of this discussion is relevant because, again, going back for people that don't know, so when we do the IBTF Nations Cup, X-Strut will be offered, and men are being offered positions in X-Strut. So this is why this conversation is relevant, because men in MBTA, am I correct, gentlemen, have not done MBTA X-Strut? Has that been a women's only sport? Okay, so Marshall, you had your hand up. What would you like to say?
Thank you, by the way, for everyone who came out. So I'm here to listen to everyone from John, who I hang on any word he ever says, through everyone, because John really affected me with something unrelated. So those simple little things do carry over. I will be competing in Super X and USTA Strut. Both of my routines are complete. One of the things that I've been worried about, and this is from an athlete perspective, my coach and I, we talk it over. He's coached women's X Strut, and I'm now pushing him, because my style is, as Jonathan Birkin mentioned, we're going off of how the criteria is judged for USTA and just the Grand Jeté. Men, they want to see oomph and strong power that you'd see in traditional classical ballet, where there are clearly defined gender roles. Well, are judges going to be looking for those clear definitions, or are they going to be more lax with us? And in contemporary ballet, you can skew the masculinity and femininity within the male roles and have that. So then they look for more flexibility over power. Finding that balance is really difficult, because nobody has really put out guidance.
Mm-hmm. And don't you think part of the future is that in the judges' manuals, at least in the manuals we work with and the seminars that we're doing, that we need to be able to talk about that? Because in our performance examples, we now have performance examples of both genders doing different things. So you do get to start to see how to reward different things in both areas.
We do. We are at a point, John referenced back when things were starting up for just USTA, and how things and NBTA and Worlds, and how that was starting. This is an opportunity for men to step into a whole new avenue and define it. So I don't know who's showing up. I've heard of somebody from Canada possibly showing up that's in the junior division. I've heard of some people out over in Europe working on stuff, but we haven't really committed. So we don't know what all is occurring, to what all is going to be brought to the table. So it's going to be this giant clay that is really exciting. It absolutely is exciting.
Well, I think what's different too is that in the men's world, it is a smaller population of people, so that awareness is there, where the women just show up and do it. They don't know who's going to be there.
Oh, the
Um,
first time I did my extra at USTA last year, I'm used to eyes on me. It comes with being a male, and the moment you put a baton in your hand. The moment they announced me for Super Extra, my stomach's starting to drop right now. And I don't drop like that. It's a whole different feeling.
Yeah. Yeah. Trenton, let's go to you for a second. And so we're starting to talk a little bit more about gender roles and about judging and things like that. Do you have any experience in the sporting world, or have you reflected on how judges are reacting to analyzing the different genders in the sport?
Well, I mean, that whole issue of objectivity comes into play, right? We are an objective sport, even though we have our scale of proficiency. No matter your organization, you're going to lean one way or the other. You're going to have some sort of preference. You brought that up with your question to John. Is a 4.5 the same for men and women? And the answer, and I would agree with John, is probably not. That there's different scales that we're judging each other on. And so that's when these examples, these ideals come into play. And so I had a question for you. I know the IBTF Strut seminar is coming up in a couple of weeks. Is there an example? Are they going to discuss that men will be a part of that?
I think that at least I can mention it. And I think that it's been a hot topic, and knowing that the event's going to be offered, I'm sure I'm not the first to think about it. But
Thank you.
I would, yes, go ahead.
No, I want to thank you for
Yeah.
stepping in that.
As a participant, then that's going to be important to me, that I want to be able to have that discussion and bounce ideas off each other. So let me jump a little bit to the other side of North America, and I'd like to ask Kevin and Corey. So Kevin, you came from the history of freestyle twirling, where there wasn't quite as much body work as there is now in the men's division. Would you have done Strut?
I did Strut.
You came to nationals and did USTA Strut, didn't you?
I did. Yes, I made top 7 in my age group. Yes, I did.
Yes.
So, yes.
Yeah. And so what inspired you to do that?
For me, part of it was I had a coach that was very much you don't twirl one way because you're a boy, or in some events because you're a boy, in some events because you're a girl. If you want to do the event, we will do the event. And for me, because I was at the time in a very small group, there was only 5 of us. So when we're all practicing together, the solo music comes on, we all do solo. The dance twirl music comes on, it's a standard piece of music, we all do dance twirl. Strut came on, and for the first little while, because I was not allowed to do, because the rules actually said boys do not do Strut. It was in the USTA rule book that says boys do not do Strut. It changed in 1984. I was there like a shot. I'm just like, I am doing this. For me, it was also, I had a very good sense of rhythm. That was one thing. I was never out of step in marching. I found it easy to get into step with USTA Strut. So I jumped in with both feet, and I actually, we had it in Canada for a couple of years. It was called Open Floor Strut. We competed it at nationals. There was no grand national for it, but we competed it there as well. Then it evolved into what became medley. But I will tell you, if anyone's seen medley, it's a blend of baton and dance, gradually adding more baton as the routine progresses. And Corey would understand this. My second section of medley, which is all supposedly, I don't know if it's changed at all, because I do mostly MBTA now. It was all, you could do dead sticks, you could do 1 revolution flips, you could do passes, but nothing could be more than 1 rep. Mm-hmm. I did that, always did my second section completely in step. Mm-hmm. It was just, it developed for me from one event to another, and I blended it in there, and it was so easy to go from one to the other because of that. So yes, well, I did. Yeah.
As we revamped the Strut event, then that was what was imperative to us, was the recognition of rewarding staying in step. Mm-hmm. That there might be phasing, but we had people choreographing routines that were completely out of step, or like doing tricks that were not possible to be done in step. So now it's kind of a re-education process of what is rewarded and what's proper and what's not. So Corey, did you ever do strut?
So I never did strut, but like Kevin was mentioning, CBTF strut transferred into medley. So I definitely did medley, and medley is 3 different sections. The first section is 48 counts of just body. And then it transfers into adding gradual batons, 1 revolution. You can do like half rolls, dead sticks, and then the whole ending is just like a freestyle essentially. It's where you really put in all your tricks and show your stuff kind of thing. So I did do that, and in CBTF still, medley is a co-ed sport, so you compete against the girls. It's not separated.
So tell me, Jonathan Birkin, so now the question goes, we're going to do X-Strut. And to me, that feels like it's a lot more challenging from a body demand standpoint of, at least the people that have been successful have been hyper flexible and being able to do all these balancing things. And yet now in USTA, the emphasis is on staying in step and maintaining a constant beat. So why do you think the value was chosen? Is it over participation because there's so many X-Strutters in MBTA?
Restate the question, sorry.
So now for IBTF, we're doing X-Strut, not USTA strut. So do you think it's because a numbers question?
I mean, that's hard to answer. I would think that there are a significant amount more X-Strutters than there are the USTA side of things, which could be why, or it could be one of the compromise events that the executive committee came to. I see Kevin. So we can just go with that. And I also think, I mean, if we dive deep into it, you can fit a significant number of X-Strutters on a floor than you can USTA strut.
So
there could be a time constraint as well.
They're always going to be moving in the same direction, roughly at the same time. So you're never going to have those collisions that would often happen when
leaping over little kids' heads, right?
Exactly. Yes.
Okay. No, good point. That's good. That's good to know. So how do we, Michael Harris, get young male twirlers? First of all, we want more male twirlers. Secondly, how do you sell strut to their parent?
Well, this is kind of one thing I've been waiting to say the whole time, and I think you kind of phrased the question perfectly. We need to teach them how to stay in control. I think that's the whole thing with strut, is it teaches you or your body, the timing of your baton, the music, like all of those things, it makes you stay in control. We're having really great discussions about, why is this person getting a 5 and this person's getting a 3.2? That's maybe a little more deserving because of their gender is different. And, even Marshall is saying, what do we put different choreography in? I think we need, if I'm a judge, I just went through my level 3, I've listened to different ones. I've listened on workshops from old people, young people, judges of all ages. And I think the one thing that they are going to reward is the person who stays in control. Hands down, they're going to win. So yeah, that's my thing. So if I have a new little student and, a lot of times new little baton student boys, they're like this little puppy over here. They're a piper. They're bouncing all over the walls. I could pitch to their parent, this is going to be the one thing that they're going to have a couple big tricks, but it's going to be really disciplined and strict. And we're going to have to do freestyle and do solo and have those other things. But this is something that is going to be performance ready in any venue.
Okay. So this is a great transition because one of our guests tonight is the first female drum major at Ohio State University. And I want to introduce Morgan Davis, and she broke some barriers in a Big Ten school. Now, keep in mind, these are marching bands that at one point in time only had men in them. And so then going from men to the all revered drum major position at Ohio State, and she winds up in this position. So Morgan, can you talk to me a little bit about the audition process? And Morgan is a former competitive twirler. I think that you would say that that helped you, but I'm not going to speak for you. Were you encouraged, intimidated? Was this just something that you said, I'm going for it?
It was definitely more like I'm just going for it. What drew me to the drum major program was just that I wanted to keep twirling. It started in high school. I wanted to be the drum major, and so that was just kind of the natural thing for me. I was like, I want to keep performing. I love twirling, so I'm just going to do that. And at that point, I was the first. I was the second woman at my high school to be the drum major, and then the first at Ohio State. So I was kind of used to being the first or one of the first, but for me, like, I love being on stage. I love being in front of people and performing and putting on a show and making people clap for me. So I will do that no matter what. So that was really what kept me going.
So it's not always a competitive twirler that goes through this training process. So can you explain the training process and how your competitive twirling skills helped you throughout it?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely the body control that Mike was talking about, body control and technique helped me a lot. Going through the drum major program at Ohio State and seeing other drum majors at other colleges, it's very like traditional and like power based. I think Marshall was talking about that before. It's very powerful and traditional in that sense. And I think it was new and different for them to see someone come in and have a new take on this drum major position and have a lot of technique that comes with it. So yeah, I definitely think that helped me, and that it kind of helped grow our program too, because it is so traditional, but they were looking for some growth because it's been decades of the same tricks and the same what to expect from a drum major. So yeah, definitely going and having that technical experience and that technical training helped me stand out against my competitors.
And do you think there was a converse set of issues in that sometimes men offering to twirl at a university, let's say 10 years ago, some people would not have entertained it, where I'm like, let's go. I want whoever is going to be the best twirler out there. Do you think that it was the same type of problem, but from a different gender approach, that, oh my gosh, for years we've only had a male drum major, we can't have a girl out there?
Yeah, I think we're definitely moving towards we want the best person no matter what. And in the past, that hasn't always been the case. I think for a lot of people, it's just kind of what they know. They've always known the drum major to be a man. They've always seen the drum major doing these standard tricks. So yeah, I think that we're definitely moving in the right direction, and it's kind of it's broadening, and there's more creativity that's going into it than we would have seen 10 years ago.
Did you broaden the scope of twirling skills that the Ohio State drum major displays?
I did my best. Yeah. Were definitely, there were some things that are standard that come with the job of being in the drum major program at Ohio State, and people look for those traditional things. But I definitely, at any chance that I got, always tried to tweak things and make them more unique to me, because I realized that that's what, one, made me stand out, and two, that's what I had grown up training and to do. So it kind of just came as second nature to me to kind of make them more unique and try to broaden it.
Did you strut as a competitive twirler?
Yeah, I did.
Did it help you with your field skills?
Yeah, I definitely think so. And also I did core twirling before I started competitive twirling, so that helped too. I was already kind of familiar with staying with the beat. So yeah, that definitely helped, because I could see where beginner drum majors would come to our clinic and they would be in high school or sometimes in college and starting to learn those fundamental things that I had already learned and that I'd already been working on for years. So yeah, definitely helped.
Trenton, what is helpful or harmful to men and women being compared in the sport?
I think the only thing that's harmful is people's pride, right? I think Morgan made a great point that that's just what people are used to seeing. And then to Michael Harris's point, a little guy who's just starting wouldn't know the difference in a men's and women's event, right? Especially if we take away these markers of only men, only women can do these things. So to them, it's just a twirling event, and it's part of the package that comes with becoming a competitive twirler. And so I think the future is bright. I think both on the college spectrum, I think people like you, Kyle, who are willing to have men on your twirling team or in your feature spots, is exactly where we need to be going. And same with the drum major positions. There's no room for discrimination based on gender, no matter who you are moving forward.
And what about as the lines blur? And is there going to be a time at which you think that people say, no, we just need to be all together and not define it by men and women? Or are there benefits to the gender specific competition?
That's a great point. I mean, there's a reason that Title IX exists when it comes to funding issues, because men's sports, for example, tend to get the most attention, tend to get the most funding. So that is an extremely fine line. But when you think about technique, I always think about the Japanese teams, right? They're wearing the same costume. They're roughly the same heights. You really, when they're moving, can't tell a difference between whose genitals are which, right? And it doesn't matter ultimately. I mean, technique is technique, and technique is in a lot of ways gender neutral. Like I said, there's a lot more overlap than there are extremes.
Well, John Chamberlain, how much of that do you think is historically driven? Because our sport comes from the old time drum major. And when drum majors for bands were all male, and then as I understand it, twirling evolved out of that, and then more females came into doing it. So how much of the gender stereotyping, John, do you think comes from the historical perspective?
Wow. I'm not sure. I don't know if I even know the answer to that one. I think, you know, I always wonder why, if it was such a dominant male beginning, why did it switch? You know, and I've heard people, you know, say, well, it was because of the war. All the men had to go to the war, and so the women were left behind, so to speak. And then when we came back, it was a different culture, especially here in the United States, because you know, you see here in the United States, I think we still struggle with obviously more. I think it'll be interesting when, I know Trenton and David are doing a study right now, but interesting to see comparing the US to an international market. I think in the international scene, it seems that the gender is more acceptable. It's, you know, male, female, it doesn't matter. Here in the United States, and maybe I'm just because that's the only place I'm from, it's a battle. You know, if you have any kind of feminine traits, you're going to potentially get ridiculed. And I think that's got it much better. You know, I go back with my sons all the time on this discussion because, you know, to someone to come out even as a gay person in the 50s was tragic. Today, it's at least acceptable. And that's a huge change here in the United States. And I think we're probably the slower end of the gender equality than many other countries. So I think, yeah, historically, I think it's a lot. And it's a challenge, you know, because I think it blocks other potential male athletes coming into twirling until we really can break that mold that it's a girls' sport, because
Right.
the general public in the United States is shocked still even to this day. And I work for a company that's extremely open to gender equality. And it's still, when I talk about twirling, many people are still shocked,
Mm-hmm.
you know, that I was a twirler and a national champion and competed like all that. And they're just going like, oh my gosh. So I think we're still not there yet. We have a long way to go yet in this country.
Well, that's a natural segue to Corey and Kevin, because there's even fewer males in Canada. So let's talk about recruitment. So there's a couple things on the diversity, equity, and inclusion talk. Leisha Strawn had talked about just the challenges that we think it's challenging here in America to get athletes of color participating. In Canada, she said it just, she never saw someone like herself that looked like her. How
Mhm.
do we get men involved? And let's skip the US for a second. Let's talk to Canada, because
Mhm.
there's less than 5 that I know of. How are you going to get more men in Canada?
Are you going or am I? I'm
You
watching
can go. You can go. You can go first. I've got a few ideas I'm trying to organize in my brain right now. So go ahead.
So I was actually just on a call last week or the week before, just on a board of directors actually. So the equivalent of a U.S. state, we have provinces.
Right.
So for the Alberta sector, anyways, all of our mind coach that hasn't been to the international level with her athletes by any means. Her name's Zoe, but she's a high school principal or an elementary school principal. And every school that she's been a principal at over the past 25 years, she's had an extracurricular program for baton twirling. And she's had 200 men. And just like blew our mind that she had 250 men in this program. None of them transitioned because she wasn't bringing kids to competitions, but she had 250 that have gone through this program and that had never seen a competition floor before, but only inside their school gym. So now it brings it back around to on the board of directors, kind of go out into communities to make it more diverse or assist in the development of underprivileged children, and give them an opportunity in the sport of baton twirling, buying their batons to start them off and things like that. And we're really going to focus in on Indigenous reservations, and then in those schools that really have nothing. And then
isn't it kind of like the thought about this? Sounds like in those programs, it's the cool kids. The cool kids are doing it. And it's like marching band. In some schools, marching band is the cool thing to do. And in some schools, it's not. It just depends on how the culture is bred.
Well, and to that, we don't have marching bands here either, right? So in Canada, we don't have marching bands. So when I got my email when I probably 16 or 17, I got for the drum major program, and I had no idea what a drum major was. I was a baton twirler. I did world championships. What was a drum major? Like, I had to do some serious digging on what Ohio State was offering me.
Wow. So Kevin, what are your thoughts on getting more young males involved?
To be completely honest, I think part of it is also a bit of a demystification of the process from coaches as well. For instance, I mean, I'm always surprised. My own thing was for instance, my mother called, got all the information from the local baton group. This is where we go. This is how old. Only at the last minute did she say, "Oh, by the way, this is for a boy." And what happened? Well, they were like, "Okay, forget all that. He has to do private lessons because boys don't learn this sport this fast enough. He will keep the girls behind." So I got thrown into private lessons right off the bat because they were convinced that boys could not keep up with the girls in this sport. I still see I get a lot of coaches up in Canada saying, and the kid is like 5 or 6. Then they're like, what do I do with this boy? I'm like, you teach him how to twirl. You don't, there's nothing different about it at the grassroots level. This is just another twirler. You don't treat them any differently. When they get to a competitive age, maybe you got to start having those conversations. But the fact of the matter is, at the recreational level where they're just learning the basics and everything, this is just another twirler. There's no reason to, be afraid of this. Like there's nothing you can do wrong because all you're going to do is take them and teach them the basics to get them started.
Well, don't you think a lot of it too is like, so you have these old style coaches, and I know that I hear it in discussions and it drives me insane that they refer to their girls. Well, my girl's this, my girl's that. And that drives me insane. So I had a color guard post I shared with our judging committee And it was about in the judging tapes, in the commentary that you're doing, then instead of saying the girl this, the girl that, you're like the performer, the athlete, the teammate. So you take gender out.
I've heard color guard comment tapes, and they're amazing. They're yeah, exactly. I think there is that we have to look at this as, in my terminology, because of where I come from, I would just say the athlete, athlete. I wouldn't say the performer. I wouldn't say the girl. I wouldn't say the boy. I would just say the athlete. And you guys had down there have, the big thing of, boys play football, boys play baseball. We up here have boys play hockey. So that, and I don't know about Corey, but I never played hockey at all. Like it wasn't my thing. I don't know whether that's because even though Vancouver has a professional team, it wasn't a big thing. It's more hockey, I find, for young kids especially, is more towards like the prairie provinces and Ontario, where it actually gets cold in the winter. But that's sort of the thing of that's what boys do. That's the sport that boys do. And I think if we can start to demystify this and just be like, oh, if he's a boy, great, bring him along. It's there's no difference. I think especially at that level, the more we treat them differently, the more they're going to feel different. And if they feel different, that might help or it might not. It depends on the kid.
So do you think part of it is education to the coaches and programs? Because, so Morgan, you were with drum majors that loved spinning a mace or a baton. Like, I'm around drum majors, they love spinning a mace. And part of the broadening of our horizons as coaches has got to be broadening the appeal. So stick twirling and martial arts, we've talked about that on the last call. So Austin, I haven't gone to you yet. Tell me if you would do strut.
Well, in the past, when I first started twirling, I never really considered doing strut, just because with having older brothers, they never did strut. So when I came around and I started twirling, I never thought about doing strut. But tonight, being on the Zoom call, you've brought a lot of attention in my eyes. Like Michael said earlier, it brings structure and discipline to the twirler. And there was a few years back when AAU added in extra into their all around. And me and my mom discussed it over a few times. And we talked about if I was going to do it because I wanted to win that all around. And things happened the next year where I couldn't make it there. But we were really considering about doing it. And I kind of got excited about it because I don't have a very large dance background. So I thought it would be a great way to kind of discipline those techniques and harness in on those and really focus to clean up the footwork in my twirling and then just in my individuals. So that's kind of where I stand on it. I think it's a great ideal now. But I do agree it kind of comes to a point where you got to learn how to judge the males compared to the girls, like we talked about a little bit earlier. So yeah.
Jonathan Birkin, you've got guys in your program. And how are you going to talk to them and encourage them to do strut as an event?
I think I'm going to leave it totally up to them, actually. I know I did talk to Bauer briefly, and it was interesting because I said to him, I was like, I've been told that the Japanese have started learning their struts, and apparently they're gorgeous. And when I said, it was interesting because when I said the Japanese, he was all about it. Oh, well, I have to do it now. Oh, interesting. I think that's an interesting, cultural dichotomy there with, well, if it's just the United States participating, I'm not going to do it. But if the Japanese are going to do it, I'm participating. So I think I would leave it up to them and what they're comfortable doing with their body, and just try to cultivate that as much as I can.
Matt Freeman, let me tell you, do you coach X strut?
Yes, I do.
And what would you find intimidating or appealing about USTA strut?
I think what is appealing about it is it's also incorporating aerials and releases, whereas in NBTA X strut it's not. So it's an extreme challenge to continue with the staying on beat, staying in step. So as you know, that's a huge focus for MBTA Extra as well throughout your whole routine. And so seeing how that transfers over into USTA Strut, in addition to releasing the baton, just adds an extra element. So I think that it, which is interesting because I know that Michael Harris said that it's that control piece. And so I think that you're seeing that control piece present in almost every program, but specifically even in MBTA Extra, you're seeing that even more because you're not able to release the baton. So how you're able to maneuver the baton without releasing it, staying in step throughout the routine, adds another element. So I think that the addition to the releases is something that is a little intimidating.
Okay. All right. So let's just go to the grassroots because we're not going to have strutters if we don't have male twirlers. Trenton, what would be your overall academic approach for these coaches and these people about recruiting young men? And basically you have to recruit their parents. So how are we getting men involved in the sport?
I think it goes back to our previous conversation, is that we need role models. And just like we're recruiting for baton twirling writ large, we need it out in the community. We need parades, we need it at football half times or whatever events that there's large crowds at, because that's what sells the sport. And so if a parent or a grandparent or whoever's watching sees a little boy out there as a potential role model, or an adult, whoever it may be, I think that's super influential. And to some extent, I think drum majors can be that person. I mean, I think that's what could get people involved, because drum majors have a lot of value and a lot of credit in those communities. But ultimately, we just got to get more twirling in front of people, just like the same problem we have in the sports at large.
Well, and it's just, there's so much exposure at the point that we can come out of this and see live performances again. You know, in the drum corps world, in the guard world, one of the best advocates for males in twirling is really Aimachi. When they get to see Aimachi winter guard and male twirlers out there, the color guard world goes ballistic. And it's all things that we as twirlers are used to seeing, but it's offering the program. And, you know, I'm sitting here, my wheels turning, that I'm a dum-dum, that I have one of the best talents at my hands every day here in town at my university. And I've not used him to say, let's have a boys class. Let's see how many we're going to offer this. So I just want to inspire each of you to kind of figure out, like, what are next steps? I don't want to just have these talks and then leave them, even though, like, I get so fired up and I love talking about these topics, but I don't want it to be a balloon that loses air when we finish this conversation. So how do we keep it going? Michael, what would you want to do to recruit male twirlers? Michael Harris.
Well, I'm thinking something social media, some TikTok, something, because that's our world that we're living in right now. And there is a color guard page, and I might mess up the name of it, but they should definitely get some credit. I'm pretty sure it's Guys in Color Guard, and they share all kinds of videos. And I think it would be really great if we developed the, like, you know, some type of like a hashtag or a page, or that, you know, where it's, you know, baton for everyone, or, you know, making it gender neutral, you know, not saying it's for boys, you know, but making it for everyone and all inclusive, something, you know, some type of a campaign, you know, like
Right.
that's kind of almost what I envision. And
Yeah,
more awareness, more, like Trenton was saying, we got to be twirling places, you know, and figure out how to get us out there better, a little more efficiently.
Well, just even on TikTok, watching Issei of Japan, like his following and what he's able to do on TikTok. I don't know if you've watched him, but, you know, it's just, his presence is just so cool that I see people wanting to emulate that. Corey, you had your hand up. What's up?
So just on kind of getting kids in general into baton, I know with like my coach, Loran Meek, with the Baton and Dance Company, bringing in more students has kind of been the problem over the past couple of years, is recruiting new kids. And I know now, I don't have my own club myself because I'm more focused on judging these days and running clinics, but she's more branched out into a vast variety that she's offering within the club. So whether it be juggling classes, acrobatic arts, of course, is big So acrobatic arts is a huge thing because the boys all want to be able to flip. So bringing that in, teaching them how to juggle with not batons first, and then just slipping batons in there, and then they get hooked in it.
Good idea.
Really good. That's really good. I think that there's a way that even when this is posted on social media, that some of these brainstorm things could be out there. If all of you want to contribute in it and say, exactly that, Corey, like, let's offer some juggling classes. Let's offer some, things exactly like you just said, just to inspire activity and get exposure. Because how many kids in marching band, I've had one of my best students that I wish would have started as a young kid, and he was a trombone in the band. And I came up to rehearsal and I see this kid twirling a baton and he had technique. I'm like, wait a minute, who is this kid? What is he doing? And it was just, he had been around it and he wanted to try it. Marshall, your hand's up. What's up?
I just want to tag on to Michael Harris. There is a Facebook group out there specifically for guys and twirling. So if anybody's interested, I'm just going to say it here. It's called Mr. Major. And if you pop up, I know your names. I'll make sure you guys are accepted into it. Kyle, you're free to join it also. It's about us supporting men and males in our artistic sport and growing. It's not pretty active, so there is a base there. And Michael, you were talking about going to social media. Absolutely. There's a start. So you mentioned that, it popped in my head. I did want to tag that in there. So feel free. I'm in it. Like I said, if I see your names pop up, I'll make sure you guys get accepted into it.
All right. Thank you, Marshall. Michael Lopez, is there anything coming out from a social media standpoint that you're aware of that focus? I'm one of those people that my daughter happened to lose several male friends to suicide. And it triggers my thoughts because we just had International Women's Day and we're uplifting all of the people that need uplifting, but sometimes the most gregarious, most visible, the people that come across the happiest are the ones that need engaging and the ones that need support. And not to take this to the dark side, but I'm just saying, I don't want to have this International Day of Women and know that we want more dynamic young men and even men who aren't going to be so good. We just want men involved in the sport. So is there a social media campaign that you're aware of that would put some spotlight on the men?
Currently, there's not, but we can definitely do something about it. Here in the next 3 days, maybe we can come up with a campaign. And you know what? It's going back to just real quick, going back to Michael's point about how to get more males in baton. The thing is, what I see on social media, all you see is the women. You never see the past champions of men, and the thing is, for those that are looking for other activities for their little boy, so they'll have friends that are in baton. Hey, try baton, but you keep seeing women. You're not seeing both men and women together.
Yes. And so Morgan, isn't there a young boys program that starts at Ohio State that kind of grooms these drum majors from the ground up?
Yeah, the drum major program has clinics, winter clinics and summer clinics. And that's really geared towards high school age kids and younger. So it's men and women, boys and girls who can come, and it has seen more diversity. There was definitely more diversity in my last year than I saw in my first year. So that's definitely moving in the right direction too. But yeah, we definitely try to get as many young people as possible with a baton in their hands and at clinics.
That's awesome. And so that's just one segment of people that are driven with a goal. So, I think that we talked about this last week. We were talking about special needs groups. And so in order to build a special need group, you can't, I think, just have it. You've got to have a goal of what to do with it. So Matt, if you were to start a boys program, would you have a way, what would be your goal with them?
I think when I think of the program that I'm running now and the men that I have participating in it, it's a very interesting concept when thinking about how they joined and what keeps them going and what keeps them motivated. And we're almost dealing with a double-edged sword in when the men or boys are younger, their parents are wanting to see them very different from the girl athlete or from the female baton twirler. And so it becomes a choice of the individual athlete and how they would like to progress within the sport and being able to be a coach that provides whatever they're looking for. My wife is a kindergarten teacher, and there was a boy in her class that wanted to twirl. He had a best friend that wanted to twirl, and his parents wouldn't let him. So that young boy is still twirling and a part of our group now. He still has that friend that he had in kindergarten that wanted or had an interest in it and didn't pursue it because of that parent influence as well. And I think that's a big factor here too, when we're looking at the progress of it and how important it is for us as the male representation of the sport to continue to go out there and to teach and to continue to be an example for what twirling can provide men in the sport and what it can provide you, so that we're that living proof and living example to keep it alive.
Yeah, and exposure and visibility. So Michael Harris, in the Deputies Corps, it appeared that it was the girls were the twirlers and the guys were the drumline. Did you ever have it so that there were guys that were twirlers not in drumline?
There are guys that were twirlers that are not in drumline. Not until Kyler, that I can think of. There were a couple local kids at the high school that actually Morgan went to that had popped in and out just to come to learn how to twirl, to be that spot. But we had never had anybody join that says, I want to join to be a drum major. I did that role when I was, in high school and, younger, whatever. But I started as a drummer, actually. First, I started as a banner carrier. That's what got me in the baton corps, because the kid didn't show up. Okay, and I was there, and my the directors looked at me like, can you carry the banner? Okay, so I carried the banner. That was my first parade, and then it was baton and drums, so I learned how to do the drums, and then my sister started teaching me how to do twirls in the living room, and then I put the drums down. So that's pretty much the transition. And
it's just opportunity and exposure. And I think when we use the international examples of the Japanese and the French, people see people they want to be. And I think the more that we can put out there the goals of who kids want to be, the better it is, because parents want to make their kids' dreams come true for the most part. I think people don't try to screw up on purpose. I think that people want, if somebody said, I want to do that, most parents try to find a way to do it, but it's about exposure and it's about getting it out there. So I'm going to stop one of my frequent flyers here in a voice I greatly respect, but I don't get to see her face a lot here. Audrey, have you had a specific boys class in your studio? Maybe.
There we go. Hi.
Okay.
I do not, and this has been very interesting. I do have a boy that I kind of just started, and his sister twirled, and I kind of find that when you have a sister that twirls, that the boys might be a little bit more interested in it, and I think the parents might allow it to happen. When he started, he said, I think I want to twirl. And I said, all right, but you're going to do things the right way. Is that okay? And he said, yes, but I don't want to twirl like my sister. And I said, what do you mean you don't want to twirl like your sister? He said, I don't want to have a pretty hand. He said, can I keep my hand in a fist? And I said, sure. I said, that's fine. So I've been very doing moves that are a little bit kind of tough, like I have him smack the ground at one point, and I said, or I double knee pass, and I said, the drum major at Ohio, which he is enthralled with, I said, they do that. And he said, I know, I watched it. So it's just, it's a funny avenue, to go. And, I'm listening to all these wonderful gentlemen, and I've seen most all of them twirl, and they're fantastic, but it's like, how do you reach out to people and try to get them to come into your studio? I have a lot of boys that do hip hop. They love the hip hop. Now, I think the juggling thing was a great idea to maybe start a juggling class.
You hit on a great idea too, Audrey, about styling, in that just in my guard at the university, if I am doing a girly girl dancing with a boa on a chair choreography, that might work for some, but in a football setting, I have to be careful to what I'm exposing the males to, and what the audience, whatever's going to work for the audience and whatever my guys are comfortable with. So I do tailor the choreography at times to make sure it works for everyone. So sometimes maybe you have to be aware of that. We have a mom on the call, Janet, who has a young son who twirls. Is there anything any of these fine gentlemen could offer you, Jennifer, that would help with your quest with your son?
Oh, hi guys. Thanks. I don't really know. It's interesting that what she just said. So during COVID, I found my old baton bag with all my batons in it, and we were bored, and I just got them out and we started twirling. So my 6-year-old daughter started twirling, and my 11-year-old son picked it up, and it just clicked. Like, I mean, he's kind of a fidgety, excited kid anyways. And so it was just something that he could grab. And he walks around the house all day long with it now. But it has been a challenge because he's 11 and he's at that awkward stage, and, he doesn't want to twirl like his sister. So he's not comfortable enough in his own skin at this age to be doing grangetés or doing, the more ballet, hands and stuff. He wants to be more of that, kind of karate, like tough, macho kind of, more hip hop-ish kind of, style. And I think when you're talking about judging, and he's been to several competitions now, but it is hard because he is competing against all the girls, and he's like, but I don't twirl like the girls. And so that's something that we're trying to figure out as we go through this. But I don't really know. It's just great to hear, all the other guys out there that are still twirling. But it would be great for him to have that experience, to be somewhere where there are 11, 12, 13-year-old boys doing the thing that he loves and enjoys the most right now, because he doesn't have that. So,
well, and
I don't have any advice.
Jennifer, there's definitely a sense of teamwork from being an observer of when I see the boys at AYOP and they're their own club, they're their own competitive, like, I'm going to beat you, but I'm going to hang with you. That own, that competitive rivalry that pushes things, but also that sense of camaraderie and that shared experience. So I think that the more boys we have, the more boys we will have. And I think tonight's discussion is a really good start to that. And your knowledge is just so wide and so broad and so long that everybody can learn from it. And I think that I want to go forward from here, and how we take all of your ideas and nudge it into the next step. Because face it, we're in a rebirth. We're totally in a rebirth when we come out of this. So isn't it a fresh time to go, let's look at some things, some new ways, and let's open the doors to some really great activities, and let alone over COVID, between Zoom, between continuing education, between all the things we've been able to do, it has felt like a really growing time for everyone. Does anyone go ahead? Someone started to have a last statement. Okay. All right. Marshall, go ahead.
Something that piqued me that many people have mentioned, and there wasn't a resolution, so to say, about how to deal with it, is dealing with, and I'm going to actually assign these terms just for ease, masculinity versus femininity, and the spectrum in between. Is that I had to learn both. I had a marching band director that forced me to be feminine. I was forced. I was having to shake my hips, and she told my mom to have me tuck myself so that I would appear androgynous. And then I had my baton twirling coach that was the total opposite. I was dancing, I was twirling to heavy metal. I was twirling to yodeling at one point, and pushed me artistically and masculine. One of the things that's I'm very key with William, my son, is that I don't want to push him more to the masculine or the feminine, but where we can grow is by pushing men to find their own comfortable style.
Well, and I think from a judging and coaching standpoint, good technique is good technique.
Yes.
And so excellence is excellence. So if you're worried too much about what direction you're going stylistically, you can't have style without technique. So I'm just speaking for myself and as a judge and a coach, that technique has to come first. So regardless of whatever style you're going to choose, you've always got to choose excellence. So I'm going to let the future doctor in the room here have the last statement on gender roles in our sport and how it impacts children. So I want, above all, we want to be a healthy activity for our athletes. And so we want to guide coaches and judges. What's one of the most helpful things they could do in coaching young men in the sport trend? That's kind of a broad question, but.
No, I think listen to the athlete. Listen to what they're comfortable with. That's what's going to keep them in the sport the longest. If they're more comfortable doing the ninja tricks and having a fist for a free hand, that's what they need at that time. And once they develop their technique, once they develop their own individual style, much less their confidence, then they can branch out into more classically trained ballet. It may come later, and they can twirl to whatever they want. But listen to the kids and go with what they need at that moment, because they're getting pressure probably from their peers at school, like in Matt's example with the friend, but maybe also from the parents or even their sibling about to be different. And ultimately, boys and girls want to be different at a certain age, and then they either gain the confidence or they lose it. So listen to your kid and figure out what they need at that time and go with it.
Well, thank you all for your involvement, your encouragement, your inspiration in our sport. It's a delight to see some faces I haven't seen for a long time. And I think, like I said, history matters and the future looks bright. And all of your voices, I think, can help spur on a whole new generation. And I think we can help other coaches along, and we can help other twirlers along, and certainly can help the judges along, you know, as we sit here tonight and talk about like what we need to address next in judging. And I'm excited about what we're supposed to see in the next year. So I hope everybody's starting to inch towards an open, a more open world than what we've had. And we're going to see amazing things. Think about it. We've not seen each other on the floor. Now it'll be 2 years until we actively see, and there's whole new standards to be set. So I just want to say thank you. And I really hope we have a lot of men setting new standards soon. Thank you all for coming on tonight. I can't wait to see all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kyle.
Thank you.